Testing.
Ms. Lin, I received your agenda today. It starts 5 o'clock. I wonder why.
Yeah.
I'm talking about something. That's why, you know, when I
received your agenda today. It starts 5 o'clock. I wonder why.
Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Chào anh Hưng, anh Châu, anh Nhất Thiên. Thưa quý anh có nghe không ạ?
Dạ, nghe rõ. Yes.
Cảm ơn quý anh.
Bây giờ chưa có ai thì mình hỏi thăm thử âm thanh tôi nghe được không? Phan Thanh Châu.
Anh cho microphone nhỏ xuống chút xíu.
Hơi lớn hả?
Dạ, hơi lớn.
Dạ.
Nghe được rất tốt ạ.
Dạ,
Không phải hơi lớn mà thấy nghe có ồn, mà thấy có echo, có xíu echo.
Đúng rồi, có echo đó.
Dạ, ok.
Anh Phan Thông Hưng, anh nói lại tôi cho nghe, nói lại đi ạ.
Dạ, chào anh Phúc, nghe được rõ chưa?
Dạ, rất là rõ. Dạ, very good anh. Quality rất tốt. Anh Thiên cho nghe.
Dạ, hôm nay em dùng microphone thì chắc nghe rõ hơn.
Oh, rất tốt. Dạ, rất tốt. Anh Trần Anh ạ. Xin anh lên tiếng.
Chào anh Như Phúc, chào tất cả các anh chị.
Dạ, thưa anh Trần Anh hơi có echo.
Dạ, chào anh.
Echo hả?
Dạ vâng, anh có echo khá nhiều đó.
Tại cái phòng được vang để
anh dùng cách nào đó.
Thật ra thì Trần Anh không có nói. Để Trần Anh thử cái headphone.
Chào bác sĩ Hội. Xin mời bác sĩ Hội lên tiếng để thử micro ạ. Dạ, không nghe.
Rồi tôi thử micro ok chứ phải không ạ?
Rồi, rất tốt, rất tốt cho anh.
Vậy là quá tốt đi.
Trần Anh check lại cái mic của Trần Anh có nghe rõ không anh?
Dạ, nghe rất rõ nhưng mà vẫn còn echo nhiều lắm.
Echo hả?
Dạ, echo rất nhiều.
Để Trần Anh mở cửa, nó bị cái phòng đó.
Dạ, phòng thường là
âm thanh nó trong lắm, very clear.
Dạ, nó chỉ có echo thôi.
Dạ.
Anh Nhất Thiên cho cái camera nó lên. Ok, đẹp rồi. Dạ.
Khi anh Phan Thông Hưng mà nói anh Phan Thông Hưng ngồi gần quá thì nó còn lại cái khuôn mặt không, chứ nó không có cái đầu nó bị dính ở trên rồi đó. Thành ra ở trong cái vị thế của anh Phan Thông Hưng hiện tại thì là rất là đẹp. Yeah.
Rồi, cái mic của Trần Anh không biết là Như Phúc nghe còn echo.
Dạ, khá
tốt
hơn
rồi, tốt rồi.
Khá hơn rồi ạ.
Dạ,
tốt rồi.
Dạ, rồi cảm ơn các anh chị.
Để hỏi lại chút chắc là cái phần mấy cái slide này là anh Trần Anh sẽ show hay là anh Phan Thông Hưng sẽ show hay là Hưng sẽ show?
Trần Anh show.
Dạ vâng. Anh có cái slide mới nhất phải không?
Nhưng mà cái mới nhất có 5 trang đúng không?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 trang.
7 trang á.
Gửi trước đây khoảng chừng 1 tiếng rưỡi.
Trần Anh có nhớ có 5 trang à?
Gửi lại cho anh ha.
Rồi gửi lại đây. Thank you.
Như nào có thể sửa lại tên bằng tiếng Anh đi, chúng ta để cho người ngoại quốc người ta thấy đó, bây giờ chúng ta sửa được rồi đó.
Thưa cái đó đã nói lần trước rồi, ai muốn để sao thì để đó thưa anh.
Thì tôi đề nghị những người Việt Nam mình để Anh, Phan Văn Châu thì không biết Anh là cái gì thì nó mình tự sửa đi được.
Anh Trần Anh, tôi đề nghị với anh là anh cho cái volume của cái microphone xuống một chút. Cái volume
anh nhắc lại cái anh vừa nói gì anh nhé.
Dạ, volume của cái microphone của anh đó.
Lên hay xuống?
Xuống một tí thôi, xuống khoảng 10% thôi.
Rồi, giờ ok chưa?
Dạ, phải lên một
cho anh Trần Anh rồi đó. Email cho anh Trần Anh rồi.
Ok, thank you.
Rồi, tốt rồi đó anh. Dạ, tốt lắm rồi đó.
Cảm ơn anh.
Rồi.
Anh Như Phúc có nghe thấy ok không?
Dạ, âm thanh rất tốt, ánh sáng vừa đủ, ít bị cái phản chiếu ở trên mắt kính của mình của luật sư, rất là tốt ạ.
Mình đã có quan khách vào rồi đó, những người mà panelists they're here with us, so let's talk in English if you can. Okay, thank you. So we have the Honorable we can't see the whole name. Okay. Okay. We have the Honorable Mansoor Shaikh Imam. Could I ask you to see if you can test your camera, I mean your video for us? The Honorable Mansoor Sheikh
Okay.
Imam. Okay.
All right. I think we're fine now. Thank you very much. Yes,
Great.
I am.
I think
Thank you, and
we could hear you
good evening
fine.
to all of you.
Okay. So Jeffrey, could I test your camera and video? Could you say something?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello. I don't know whether it's morning, evening, night.
It's
within a certain 24
it's
hours.
everywhere.
Good evening.
Hi. Good.
Good evening, sir.
Nice to see you all. And I'm glad that I've managed to find a room. I've got to catch a train, as you possibly know. So you start at 9 o'clock and I walk away at just after 20 minutes past. But there will be somebody else to take over and answer the questions. I see Luke de Pulford is there.
Yes.
He can't really answer questions, but he probably have a good go. And we're going to be joined by Hamid Sabi, so he'll be able to answer questions.
Okay.
So I hope that my time-limited contribution will be of value. If I don't leave at 20 past, I'll have to sleep on the streets of London, which probably would be good for me in some ways, but not quite so good in others. And overall, I've got one or two things to do tomorrow at home, so I better get back.
So Jeffrey, you took 5 minutes away from us. You were going to be leaving at 9:25. Now
Yeah, I'm a very nervous traveler. And Hamid will be perfect at getting the answers. So let's see how we do. If you start on time, I'm sure we can accomplish a great deal in 20 minutes, 21 minutes.
Right.
Dr. Hung, can you send me back the slideshow? I did not receive it yet.
I just sent it. Did you not receive it? I'll go ahead and send it to you directly instead of to the group. Okay.
I'll try this with the earphones. My hearing's pretty dodgy, so it may be better with the earphones. Let's see. Somebody say something. God,
Good evening, Sir Jeffrey.
That's better. That's okay. I don't drive you all into complete silence. That's good.
No.
Good afternoon.
We can't really be silenced. We're just being respectful.
Well,
How's the weather over there, sir?
Okay, and Tangan, could you check your email again?
Okay, I will. Thank you.
And how many people are we expecting to join in the next 6 minutes?
At this point, we have 210 people registered. Sir Jeffrey, and we have 45 or 46 that are dignitaries that are expected on the discussion.
That's a big group. So
yeah, and I'm trusting Luke and Lynn will know how to wing this because I don't know how to wing this.
Winging it's a piece of cake, really. Luke will tell you all about it.
Thanks for the vote of confidence there, Sir Jeffrey.
That's perfectly all right. Just smile a lot and say whatever comes in your head. It's fine. And so are there lots of people already joining, but not on screen? Is that the position of the hundreds who are joining?
Those are joining people that who have been invited on the panel as panelists. I think in a few minutes we'll be starting the session for everybody, and I think that's okay. When you will see a lot more people.
That's terrific. And the whole thing is an hour and a half, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So all we need is Hamid to turn up to be my long stop.
Yes, yes. And I'm sure he will be there.
He's infinitely reliable.
I know.
As is Luke de Pulford on a good day. Oh, sorry, Luke.
I'll see if Luke have a comeback for you. But,
I wouldn't dare. I'm very deferential to the great Knight, Jeffrey Knight.
Oh, stop that.
Do you have the slides, Trần Anh?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, Hamid Sabi. Good evening. A late hour to see you in a suit, Hamid. Great respect to the gathering group. Suit and tie. That's a good score.
Mr. Sabi, could you test your mic and speak something?
Yes.
Something?
Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Great. We can hear you.
So where are you, Jeffrey? You're in your club?
Me?
Yes.
I'm not allowed to say where I am, but I'm not in the club, and I've got to get out of here just after 20 past in order to catch the train home. So it'll be over to you then, Hamid. But they'll be in good hands. I'm afraid our impoverished little country has a poor railway service. If you go to a country like the Netherlands, trains run all through the night. And so somebody like me wouldn't have this excuse to quit early. But here, if you live 70 miles away, which is what I do, you've got to be on a very early train to get home at all. And even then,
I just want to inform you, Sir Jeffrey, that we have some UK parliamentarians on the line. So if you have a complaint about the transportation service, you can say that directly.
Well, they'll have similar experiences, I think, probably. But and even on this train, if I don't alert the guard to which station I'm getting off at, they don't even stop the train. So it runs off. If I fall asleep, I land up at the end of the line. So it's an exciting venture.
Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. Janet Rice.
Thank you for trying to make it. I know you have to leave at 30 minutes after, so we're trying to get to you.
Thank you.
We have another minute.
We were so well behaved. It's wonderful. The discipline of Zoom.
Hi, it's just Karen Vecchio. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but it shows that I'm in a practice session, but I believe I should not be one of the panelists. I know I was asked, but my colleague Garnet Jennis is on there today to be our spokesperson. So I don't think I should be on the panel. I think I'm more of an observer, and I just wanted to state that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's noted. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would say the same thing for me. When I came into the Julie Méville-Deschênes, senator, when I joined in, they said I was a panelist. I'm mostly an observer too.
Yes, it's noted. I don't know how to unpanelist somebody, so if you don't mind, you can just stay in that role, but we won't call on you.
So the organizer respectfully asks that everyone begin to mute their microphone for the keynote speaker portion of the conference. Welcome to the conference of the Uyghur Tribunal Judgment of China's Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity, and Torture. In the next 90 minutes, we will hear from our keynote speaker, Sir Jeffrey Nice, QC, Chair of the Uyghur Tribunal, and a short Q&A with Sir Jeffrey and the Uyghur Tribunal. Thereafter, we will have a roundtable of over 30 discussants. If you have questions for Sir Jeffrey, please post them in the question box. You can also post questions for the roundtable. In case of unforeseeable circumstances, if we have technical difficulties, please return to the conference and we will be here. We begin with the conference with our keynote speaker. Sir Jeffrey Nice, QC, Chair of the Uyghur Tribunal, has been a barrister since 1971 and served as a part-time judge in England between 1984 and 2018. Between 1998 and 2006, he led the prosecution of Slobodan Milosevic at the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. He was Gresham College Professor of Law from 2012 to 2016 and was chair of the China Tribunal. Please welcome Sir Jeffrey.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me and allowing me to speak and allowing me to leave after 20 minutes because I have to catch the last train home to avoid sleeping on the streets of London. But although I will leave you, you're in admirable hands because Hamid Sabi, who is with us, is or was counsel to the Uyghur Tribunal, but more important, he's the person who introduced me 7 or 8 years ago to people's tribunals. I didn't think much of them when he introduced me, and I took a rather distant view of them, but by the end, I could see that his particular tribunal, which concerned events in Iran in the late 1980s, had some very considerable advantages. And so he's the ideal person to take over from me and answer questions when I'm gone. After that first tribunal, I worked on another much less satisfactory tribunal, in my opinion, which, although it was effective in the setting in which it operated, I thought was unsatisfactory in various ways. Lessons learned from those two tribunals were applied by me when I chaired first the China Tribunal into forced organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience by the PRC, but principally forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners, and then more recently of the Uyghur Tribunal. Now, People's Tribunals have the same general title, People's Tribunals, and they're not at all similar. They're very different, one from the next, and it's important to bear that in mind. They have one thing in common, namely that they provide information or answers to questions that aren't being dealt with by national or international bodies when they could or should be. But apart from having that feature in common, it's important to realize that they can be very, very different in what they seek to do. At one end of the scale, they can be highly activist organizations. At the other end of the scale, they can be completely non-activist. And so far as the Uyghur Tribunal is concerned, we were and are not activist. Why? Well, if you look at the work of civil society in the most general setting or general terms, the work of citizens who are not parliamentarians, they're not in government, they don't have official function. They can do various things, but until such time as society or international society is ready for revolution, the best thing, you may think, is for them to try and help the functioning parts of national or international society, including courts, that could do things better. And that is certainly what really underlies, I suppose, the way the Uyghur Tribunal operated. And I think I've got about 11 or 12 points, each of them a very short sentence, but that would now be principles I would apply on the basis of my experience. First, a People's Tribunal of the kind I have chaired needs to be commissioned by an interested organization, an activist organization, in this case, the World Uyghur Congress. Second, having been commissioned, and of course the commissioning body will have to provide necessary funds, although all members of the tribunal are completely unpaid and not allowed to put money in, having been commissioned, it's necessary that there is a separation of functions and that the commissioning NGO recognizes that the tribunal may not reach the conclusion the commissioning NGO wants. We're not a rubber stamp. The next thing, critically important and valuable, is to appoint disinterested people, people who aren't committed to the cause concerned. It may sound harsh, but the 9 members of the Uyghur Tribunal weren't particularly concerned about the Uyghurs, no more than they were concerned about Rohingya Muslims or Nigerian Christians who might be subject of oppression. No, our concern was the fact that there was information that was not being made available to us. The tribunal that is appointed should be diverse in background. And if you look at the composition of our tribunal, it was in discipline, as well as in gender and other diverse characteristics. Next, the tribunal should never be composed, in my view, of experts, whether lawyers or people who have the label human rights hung around their neck. Sometimes people hang that label around my neck. I never seek it. I never use it of myself. I'm just a citizen, and it's much better that I'm a citizen. I can operate as effectively a juror, for those of you familiar with jury trials. Next, having established yourself, you go and gather evidence to find out what may be proved. You do not have a prosecution's case or a legal case to try and prove. You're not there looking for crimes, first of all. You're there looking to see what the evidence actually shows. And only when you've begun to form views about what the evidence shows, do you bring the lawyers in to tell you what's the relevant law that you can apply to the facts you're finding in order to decide whether crimes have been committed. And it's very important to realize, sometimes difficult, lawyers are the servants of people. It's not the other way around. Lawyers can be over-important, and you've got to be careful to keep them in check. Next, in a case like the one we were dealing with, or a situation like the one we were dealing with, invite the PRC, the People's Republic of China, to participate, which we did on many occasions. They always declined, but never allow that to be held against them. You can't draw inferences adverse to the PRC from the fact that they've been invited to participate and they haven't. Think what you would feel if a bunch of 9 people from another country did the same thing to your country. No, it would have been better if they'd participated, but they didn't. we acted on the basis of evidence we had received, not on the basis of evidence we did not receive. Next, apply both to the law, to the facts, or to proving of the facts, and to finding of the legal consequences, the strictest possible proof beyond reasonable doubt. Easy to understand in respect of factual findings, but very important for the law. Where the law is uncertain, don't venture beyond what the courts have already decided the law is. If you do that, you're on a path to a very dangerous entanglement with experts outside the conclusions you reach. Just take the law as it is clearly shown to be. And that's the way we reached our conclusion. And then the last point of great importance in my judgment is make no recommendations. Why? Because to make recommendations and tell people, governments and businesses and universities, how to run their affairs is quite an impertinence, because it assumes that people will not perform the duties they have to perform when they interact with, in this case, the People's Republic of China. It is quite enough to provide them with a reliable, dependable, well-established collection of factual and legal findings and leave them to discharge their duties. That's what we did with the Uyghur Tribunal, and it's now 11 minutes past 9.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeffrey Nice, for your leadership and your wisdom and compassion. There may be a couple of questions in the audience for you. Also with us is Mr. Hamid Sabi, counsel to the Uyghur Tribunal, and he will also be helping us with answering some questions. If you have questions for Sir Jeffrey, could you raise your hands?
It's usually the first person to ask a question that's required to break the ice. Now, come on, I'm out of here in 9 minutes' time. So one of you feel confident.
Well, what do you think, how should people respond to the judgment, and what do you think could be done about it?
Well, that's a critical question, and it's been actually quite rewarding, I think. What we would have wanted was for people to apply the judgment in decisions that they have to make. And what we have discovered in respect to the Uyghur Tribunal is that as newspaper reports deal with, for example, decisions whether or not to send people to the Olympic Games, what to do about solar panels, all sorts of other things, we find that the Uyghur Tribunal judgment by that name is mentioned. And that means that people have, amongst other things, and we are not expecting to be the cause of anything. We are an element that people should apply in the process of reasoning that we all do when we decide how to discharge the duties we have within the world and to our fellow citizens.
Yes, and there's a question from one of the MP. Was there a call for, was there an open call for evidence?
Yes. First, we have an enormous stock of evidence, which is on a computerized database, as you would expect. Evidence was gathered by Hamid Sabi and his team according to criteria that we set down that related to the allegations as we understood them in the most general terms to be. And from that computerized base, Hamid Sabi and his team selected a fair representation of evidence, always remembering that it's important, critically important, to make sure that evidence favorable to the PRC is also included. But at all times, there was an open invitation on the website for evidence to be provided, and Hamid can deal with this possibly after I've gone, but there was an open invitation to provide evidence. And as things developed, the 9 members of the tribunal themselves raised questions with Hamid Sabi as to what evidence they would like to hear, in addition to what he'd already provided.
So this question is a little bit different, but I'll go ahead and give it to you. Considering the China tribunal, would it be necessary for one or more NGO to sponsor another tribunal to address whether the crackdown on the Falun Gong rise to the level of genocide?
Well, I don't think that's a question for me to answer, because I'm not here to tell other people what to do. In the China tribunal, genocide was not found, although it was explained that there was indications that it might have been committed, but that there wasn't at that stage sufficient evidence. Now, if an NGO or an organization interested in the suffering of the Falun Gong and other prisoners of conscience feels that more evidence has come to light, it can do one of several things. But it shouldn't necessarily be the case that it turns straight to the idea of forming another tribunal. There may be other ways of doing it, other ways of reporting. Remember, if you would be so good, the underlying essential is not something that happens to be titled People's Tribunal. The underlying essential is to provide information in a reliable and dependable form to the community at large, national and international. And it would be for the organization concerned to decide what to do with new information it had. And I'm not going to tell people how to run their lives.
Right, fair enough. So this is from another MP. How do you respond to the charge that the tribunal is not a court?
Thank you. This comes from Nusrat Ghani. Good evening, Nusrat. Of course it's not a court. Jolly good thing too. The whole reason for having civil society activity of this kind is that formal bodies have not done what they might or should have done. So of course we're not a court. We don't have any powers, and that's our power. If you go back to the fount of all this, which is the Russell Tribunal into the alleged criminality of the United States of America in the Vietnam War, it's a tribunal that can be criticized for many things, but it's very interesting. It's worth reading about it. It's referred to in the China Tribunal and will be referred to in one of the appendices to the Uyghur Tribunal. And in it, Jean-Paul Sartre, a very famous French philosopher of the time, who formed the tribunal with the English philosopher Lord Russell, says, we are powerless, and that is our power. Be not respectful, or at least be not over-respectful of governments and courts and parliaments, because when they fail, we the people can do what we do, and we can do it in whatever way we like. And if we are able to show something to the very high level of proof that we've demanded of ourselves, if we can show that, that's quite as good as a court judgment. We don't need the separation of wearing robes or having titles or having raised pedestals to sit on. Of course, the tribunal has to sit a bit higher up so that people can see them, but that's all. We are people. The clue is in the title. I'm not concerned about not being a court, Nuz. I'm really pleased about it.
So this is from an attendee. Hello, I found it quite interesting. I don't quite understand why no recommendation should be given. Wouldn't that cause the judgment of the People's Tribunal to lack persuasion force if there is no call to action? Another question.
But why would you want me to make recommendations? Why would you want the jury in a trial of a criminal, for example, to make recommendations? You have a sensible separation of functions. We are, as I explained at the beginning, a finder of dependable, reliable, proven facts. That's what we do. And we then say to you, now this is up to you. You use it, you deploy it. And that is the way things work best. And indeed, just to finish this little analogy, when a jury brings in a verdict of guilty in respect of a criminal defendant, the jury walks away. That's it. Job finished. The judge comes in to sentence. The probation service comes in. Social services come in. The National Assembly of Lawmakers comes in if the verdict has a particular effect and need for amendment of the law. It's much, much better that you confine the decision-making process of the tribunal to facts and law and leave responsibility for next steps to other people. And I see it's 9:20, so I'm getting ready to leave. And I see that Luke's looking pleased about the fact that I'm ready to leave. Hamid's looking delighted because he can answer questions and tell you all where I've gone wrong. And I can say thank you very much for letting me contribute to this discussion of yours. And I see Dolkonissa there, who is the president or president of the World Uyghur Congress. And you heard the things I said about his immaculate following of the rule of separation of functions. And unless you want more of me at the moment, I'm going to very gently withdraw by pressing a button on the screen.
Thank you so much. I would like to speak for many of us here to appreciate the work done by the Uyghur Tribunal. You who stand up against an evil empire do exist in real life, and on this day we have a chance to meet them. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and I look forward to hearing of the results of your discussion and maybe meeting some of you in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Habib, are you in a position where you can answer some more questions?
Depends on the question, but please go ahead.
Okay. Has the UN engaged about your report given they were unable to access evidence themselves?
Sorry, can you repeat that? There was a...
This is from an MP. Her question is, has the UN engaged about your report given they have been unable to access evidence themselves?
The evidence that we have collected and collated is available to everybody. And of course, the judgment has been sent to all the organizations. I'm not particularly sure which part of UN has received it, but I'm sure it was given to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The evidence is available to all organizations. There is the whole idea of the tribunal was its transparency, that everything that the tribunal has dealt with should be available to everybody so that they can use this, and also that will give them the chance to verify the content of the judgment. So in that sense, the answer is they can access the evidence if they want to.
Yes, sir. This next question is from Sir Ian Duncan Smith. The determination of genocide is important, yet the determination of genocide is rejected by the UK government. Which hides behind the need for this to decide by a relevant court, which China will veto? How do you think this will be taken forward without a court judgment?
The position of the UK government is that they would only consider the appropriately constituted courts to make that decision. They very well know that there isn't such court to make that decision presently. There is no situation where the Uyghurs or any other group can bring a case before a judge that make that decision. And the only thing that the convention imposes upon all the member states, including the United Kingdom, is that they should take all actions necessary to stop genocide. Now, there has been a finding by a tribunal on the basis of substantial evidence. Over 70 witnesses testified, thousands of documents was presented to the tribunal, 8 days of full hearings, and the conclusion is detailed in an extensive judgment. So at minimum, the UK government can now stand up and make a decision. Do they want to ignore all this evidence, or they want to take a step? The UK government put every single hurdle in front of us. We had many requests for documents from the UK government, diplomatic wires, anything that can be helpful to the tribunal. None was provided. We even made an application on the Freedom of Information Act. We did not receive anything from the UK government. So although they show some sympathy and say they are worried about the Uyghurs, they do not positively engage with the tribunal or with any other group that is investigating this matter. And it's very unfortunate.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Sabi. We hope that your leadership will continue to help us in further our human rights and human dignity. So our next, in light of our time constraint, we have been asked to give the floor 90 seconds to Senator Janet Rice of Australia and a founder of the Greens Party. Senator Rice.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Wynne. And look, I've just got a few minutes because unfortunately it's 8:30, almost 8:30 in the morning here in Canberra where I am, and I've got a meeting to go to at 8:30 and then a parliamentary hearing at 9 o'clock. So I'm sorry I can't stay with you. Look, I really appreciate it, and I know that Sir Geoffrey has already gone, but I did want to thank him for him joining us this morning and for his work and the work of all the team in making the tribunal happen, and all the amazing complexity and the detail and the evidence which has been brought together by the tribunal. And I think it is so critical because it is clear from this evidence that, you know, the appalling human rights abuses, the appalling torture, the sexual violence, the detention, the killings which have occurred, and where the world needs to be is to work out, is to have that body of evidence to take action. I mean, I'm a senator in the Australian Parliament. We have just upgraded our sanctions regimes to enable us to apply sanctions under Magnitsky-style sanctions regimes against officials of any country or anybody who is responsible for such egregious human rights abuses. And the issue now is, what's the world going to do about it? I heard Sir Geoffrey say how, you know, it's not up to their tribunal to make recommendations as to what to do. And I accept that. It's up to us to work out what to do now that we have got this body of evidence, because it's the evidence which has been lacking up until now. We know that the Chinese Communist Party will never allow in, have not allowed in sort of international human rights observers to gather this evidence. So having this evidence before us gives us now a platform to say, well, the world needs to be taking action. If we are really genuinely committed to upholding sort of human rights for everybody on this globe, and everybody's human rights should be upheld, well, then the world needs to take action. And so what I really want to see is have much more coordinated action. Clearly, the UN is hampered in what it can do because of its upgrading.
Could you wrap it up?
Yes, I'm going to, yes. And so we need to work out and be working much more together multilaterally to be taking action, and particularly to taking action across all diplomatic sanctions, economic actions that we can take, and be doing it multilaterally. So thank you, and I'm sorry I can't stay with you for the rest of the session, but I really look forward to hearing of the outcomes of it.
Thank you so much. So next we like to make some acknowledgement. We have Professor Dr. Wynne. He will acknowledge the organizers of this conference.
Thank you, Attorney Ling. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Phúc Nguyen of Vietnam Democracy Center. I'm honored to be here to introduce the organizers. Most Venerable Thích Không Tánh, Vice President, Sangha of Unified Buddhist Church of Vietnam. Subdignitary Hua Phi, Chair, a representative of the Committee of the Popular Bloc of Cao Dai Church. Mr. Lê Thanh Nhân, Chairman, Vietnamese Nationalist Party. Dr. Đỗ Văn Hội, MD, Overseas Representative Interfaith Council of Vietnam. Mr. Phan Thanh Châu, Vice Chairman, Alliance for Free and Democratic Vietnam. Mr. Trần Anh, President, Viet 2000 Foundation. Dr. Nguyễn Như Phúc, MD, Vice President, Vietnam Democracy Center. Nguyễn Linh, JD, Director, Office of International Relations of the United Buddhist Church of Vietnam. Dr. Nhất Thiên Nguyễn, PhD, President, Vietnam Democracy Center. Ms. Nguyễn Vân Nhã, Treasurer, Vietnam Democracy Center. Mr. Nguyễn Đình Tùng, Viet 2000 Foundation. Mr. Phạm Oanh, Research Scientist, Executive Council and Founder, Asian Pacific Policy Roundtable of Minnesota. Hưng Phan, MED, Advisor and former President of the Board of Executives, the Federation of Vietnamese American Communities of the USA. Dr. Trần Quốc Hưng, MD, Coordinator, Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy, and Dr. Mai Thanh Chuyết, PhD, President, Vietnamese Environmental Protection Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Next, we have Professor Hung Phan, who will acknowledge the organizations in attendance of the conference.
Oh, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes.
We would like to thank the 64 organizations from across the world who are participating today. They come from Canada, China, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, India, the UK, and the US. Participation from NGOs are very important in this endeavor and often the driving force behind the action of government. Speaking of governments, we also would like to recognize the distinguished advisors, directors, and staff from 13 congressional and parliamentarian offices and 2 US senatorial offices. We look forward to working with you in the near future to push for an end to this genocide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Phan. The second part of this conference is the Roundtable of Discussions. We are pleased to acknowledge there are over 30 discussants of the Roundtable and 45 dignitaries in attendance from over 21 nations in 10 different time zones. We are grateful for your concern and interest in the ongoing genocide in Xinjiang. It's an honor to have your presence. Next, we introduce our moderator for the roundtable, Luc de Pulford, co-chair Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China, on China, a member of the Foreign Affairs Defense and Trade Select Committee, co-founder Coalition of Genocide Response. Please welcome Luc.
Hello, I hope this is working and you can all hear me. I am great. Okay, it's Luc de Pulford here, coordinator of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China. I'm very grateful to Lynn, David, and other organizers for the privilege of trying to moderate this panel. It's good to be among friends this evening, particularly so many members of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China from around the world. I'm going to take this opportunity, please, to extend a warm invitation to legislators present who are not yet members of IPAC. Please do consider joining. This is an authentically cross-party and international group of legislators helping to reframe the China debate, and we believe for the better. Information on how to join is at ipac.global. Please do think about that. Look, this evening's discussion between legislators is intended to provide a space within which you can all share your views and ideas about what you, legislators, can do to help Uyghurs and other minorities suffering so terribly at the hands of the party state in China, especially in light of the Uyghur Tribunal judgment. To help cohere this discussion, we did send around a list of questions, and we asked each of you to indicate which you would prefer to address. So I'm going to call upon those who replied to that email first, and we'll use the remainder of the time for discussion. Do use the raise hand function or the chat box if you'd like to speak. We have 1 hour, and to enable contributions from as many members as possible in this wonderfully well-attended call, we have to limit our contributions to 2 minutes each. Legislators, I beg your forgiveness in advance if I have to cut you off after this period has elapsed. Please do help me make time for others, and please do try to orientate your contributions towards what might be useful for your colleagues around the world to hear. I was also asked to give my own short contextual introduction, but the only reflection I really want to add is this. The Uyghur Tribunal is easily the most comprehensive, easily the most rigorous, and therefore easily the most useful tool that civil society has been given, or has given to those of us who are seeking to hold the PRC accountable for its treatment of Uyghurs and other minorities. It is not to be compared with the individual opinions of lawyers or reports of NGOs, useful though they can be. The Uyghur Tribunal received hundreds of thousands of pages of evidence, and as an independent body, as you've just heard, determined that genocide, crimes against humanity, and torture have all been committed by the PRC state beyond a reasonable doubt. I believe the fact that the tribunal is not in itself binding on governments poses a powerful challenge to the legislators on this call around the world. How will you ensure that the tribunal's judgment is not ignored by your respective governments? So we have until 10:30, that's UK time, 5:30 Eastern. Please do mute your microphone if you're not speaking. On to the first question, which was, what do you think your government should be doing in response to the Uyghur Tribunal judgment? We were due to call upon Senator Jeff Merkley as the first person to address this question. I don't know if he's on the call. Senator Merkley, if you're on the call, please do unmute and speak now. You have the floor. If not, we will go to the second person that we had down to address that question, who was Louisa Wall MP from New Zealand. Louisa, are you on the call? Do we have Louisa Wall MP on the call? Okay, we'll move on to the next discussant. That would be Simon O'Connor MP, also from New Zealand. Simon, are you on the call?
I am, Luke, and hello to everyone. Thank you. I'll try to keep to 90 seconds, so cut me off, Luke. Hey, to everyone here, thank you, and a particular acknowledgement to Sir Geoffrey and all those involved with the tribunal. There's always a quote for me which stands out, granted from someone much earlier in life, who said, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know." And what the tribunal has done has clearly exposed the crimes occurring against the Uyghur people. For New Zealand, we've got a way to go to respond, from the small actions, if you will, to the larger ones, and I'll very quickly touch on that. The smaller ones is obviously New Zealand needs to be looking to those Uyghurs trying to flee the country of how we assist them into countries like New Zealand through visa changes and so forth, direct conversations, as you might anticipate, with the CCP government. And to be fair, I'm an opposition MP, but our government is speaking to Chinese authorities. But as a parliamentarian, we have two major lacks in New Zealand. One is that we do not have a modern slavery bill, as many other countries do, which allow us to address, aspects of those crimes being perpetrated in the likes of the Xinjiang province and against the Uyghurs. New Zealand does not have that form of legislation. The second is that New Zealand still does not have Magnitsky-type legislation where we're actually able to hold account and sanction individuals. So there are two major aspects there. And I know myself and Larissa Wall, my colleague in the New Zealand Parliament, continue to work and push for changes there. So we've also been led by other countries. Australia's beating us. So to my Australian colleagues, thank you with this legislation, but all support from legislatures around the world to help New Zealand. Pressure for change is welcome. And on that, Luke, I'll say thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. That was a wonderfully rich contribution. I can see we do have Senator Jeff Merkley. Senator Merkley, would you like to make a contribution? If you can hear me, do unmute. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, I'm going to go to the next person I have on the list, which is Els van Hoof, MP from Belgium. Els, please do unmute and give your contribution.
Thank you very much, Luke. I'm also a co-chair for IPEC, so I can recommend also the colleagues to participate in IPEC because it's very interesting to share ideas on everything what China concerns. But I think the Uyghur Tribunal did very important work. It's vital. But also in Belgium, I also contributed to a resolution that was voted already in July 21. Not only did we unequivocally denounce a violation of Uyghur human rights as a crime against humanity, but we also explicitly recognize that there is a serious risk of genocide against the Uyghur minority based on the Convention of 48. So that's very important, I think, the work that we did there, and we found the majority for that in Parliament. We also called for strong support for the appointment of an international research mission in line with the recommendations of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. But I additionally had also made a component in this resolution that we also should work towards strict import restrictions in order to ban goods originating from forced labor from Xinjiang. And the recent Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act from the United States is a good example for this. So that was a recommendation from Parliament to our government, and that we have to put economic pressure to hit China and a signal that this atrocious oppression must stop immediately. So we think that the times of general condemnation are over and we need strong measures. That's why we are also working in the Belgian Parliament on a due diligence act, not only versus China, but versus all countries which are not respecting human rights and are creating forced labor. So I think these are very important, strong measures which are being taken by Belgian Parliament and also being followed by the Belgian government. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Els. I'm going to hand over now to Nusrat Ghani MP, who is labelled as Mr. Tim Loughton, but is in fact Nusrat Ghani MP. Over to you, Nus.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you to everybody else that's on the call. I have been leading the work on genocide with my colleagues, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith and the real Tim Loughton, who will be speaking shortly. The Uyghur Tribunal, which took place in London, puts extra pressure on my government to now finally take a position. Now it's been made aware that there is a genocide taking place. It has to conduct an exercise to state whether it believes that there is a genocide taking place or there is not, and to present that evidence to us in the UK. I will be leading a debate next Thursday in the UK Parliament to ask the UK government to take a position. We also now must conduct some due diligence to ensure that the UK government and consumers in the UK are in no way aiding and abetting in this genocide. And we know that Uyghur slave labour is involved in many products that end up on our shelves in the UK. So we're asking for firms that are based in Xinjiang and using Uyghur slave labour to be blacklisted. We're asking for those products not to be on our shelves. And we're also asking for those individuals, those Chinese officials that are involved in the incarceration, torture and the genocide of the Uyghur people are sanctioned as well. The Uyghur Tribunal provides not only a substantial evidence, but also quite a serious determination of genocide, which makes it impossible for governments, firms, and individuals to now continue to hold the position that they weren't aware what was going on or the evidence does not stack up. I urge all the legislators on the call to follow the UK Parliament next Thursday, when I'll be joined by legislators in Westminster to hold whilst we hold this debate, and we hope that colleagues around the world can pick up our motion and replicate it in their national parliaments as well. Thank you so much, Luke.
Thank you very much indeed, Nuz. And just to remind to all the MPs, all the legislators on the call, we are discussing what MPs, what legislators around the world can do in response to the Uyghur Tribunal and sharing ideas about that. The next name I have on my list is Lord Bethell, who's a former health minister. Lord Bethell, can you hear me? If so, do unmute and make your contribution for a couple of minutes. Do we have Lord Bethell? And we don't. Okay, in which case we can go back to Louisa Wall, MP from New Zealand, who I'm very pleased to see has been able to join on this link. Louisa, another co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China for New Zealand, but also sits on the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee in New Zealand. Over to you, Louisa.
Kia ora, Luke. Kia ora koutou, and again an acknowledgement to Sir Geoffrey and the Tribunal for the evidence that they have provided to us. And I guess it is about the status of that evidence. Our government required judicial findings. I'm sure every other parliament is the same. So from my perspective, I think the UN High Commissioner report for human rights report that is due imminently is going to be incredibly helpful and obviously change the status for many of us in terms of the evidence we require to act. But just following on from my colleague Simon, I do want to highlight that we ratified ILO protocol to the Forced Labour Convention in December 2019. We have released in March last year an action plan for against forced labour, people trafficking and slavery. And we did convene in August 2021 a modern slavery leadership advisory group, and they will formally advise the government on the best way of taking this issue and have highlighted possible legislation. So we are taking action, but I guess what I wanted to say is the issue that we all have is a credible source to provide evidence for our governments to move, which is why we should be doing as much as we can to support Michelle Bachelet in her role as the UN Human Rights Commissioner. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Louisa, for that. Senator Merkley, I think we have you on the line now. Can I call upon you to give us a couple of minutes of contribution? Thank you, Senator.
Oh, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Well, thank you so much to all the members of the Tribunal for your essential work to shed light on the atrocities being carried out in Xinjiang. And thank you for the invitation to join today's discussion regarding the plight of the Uyghur people who at the very moment, as we are here, are being forced to endure not only the violation of their rights as humans, but forced into slavery and acts of genocide affecting them as outlined by the international community. Here in the United States, our nation has sought to bring attention to what's occurring in Xinjiang. Two administrations of very different perspectives and different political parties have both officially declared that the actions being taken by the Chinese government against the Uyghur community is in fact genocide. And our government, the United States government, has declared a diplomatic boycott of next month's Olympic Winter Games over the human rights abuses of Xinjiang and elsewhere. And I might add that as the chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, which addresses human rights in China, I've been doing all I can to hold hearings to highlight these abuses and to call for every possible approach to magnify attention during this moment when the world will be looking to China with the start of the Games just a short time from now. Through the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, the Congress has given our president and our Secretary of State authority to use financial and visa entry sanctions to hold Chinese officials who are complicit in these egregious human rights abuses. We've also put export restrictions in place to stop US companies from helping to build high-tech surveillance system that's being used. And recently, President Biden signed into law the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And I'm particularly connected to that because Senator Marco Rubio and I crafted that bill and fought for it to get passed. And we want a strong message that America's consumers and our marketplace are not going to be complicit in these abuses. Still, so much more needs to be done. With the large scope of forced labor in Xinjiang, we have to assume that whatever products come from there are being made through forced labor. We have in our bill a safe harbor if you can meet standards to prove otherwise. It's certainly my hope that those companies that are continuing to produce in that region will quickly work to move out of the region if they cannot utilize the safe harbor in the bill, and send a powerful message that the companies themselves will not be complicit in these actions. And I hope governments across the globe will do similar actions to what we have just done here in America, because it simply is such a more powerful, effective strategy if multiple governments engage simultaneously in the similar effort. So since I have your all's attention, I would encourage you to go back, look at the provisions of our Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and consider enacting the same similar provisions in your own legislative process. The greater the number of countries that take a stand against these tainted imports, the more effective we will be, the more attention China will pay. And the more unified we can be, the better our chances of costs and consequences for the beneficiaries of slave labor. It's hard for me to say that in the face of genocide and slave labor, our best recourse is economic tools. But that is what we have. And so let's apply them as effectively as we possibly can, and have the Chinese government think twice about what they're doing. Because working together, we can strike at the heart of a major funding source for the genocide against the Uyghurs and prevent China from gaining a market advantage from the use of slave labor. And hopefully Beijing will start to rethink how their global brand is compromised and damaged. Their leadership is damaged, their soft power is damaged when they're engaging in horrendous violations of human rights, because the world is paying attention. So thank you to all of the 100+ world organizations participating in this conference for being invested in this fight for human decency, this fight specifically against genocide being used against the Uyghur ethnic minority. Thank you for letting me share your conference time and share these comments.
Thank you very much indeed, Senator Merkley, and for all of your work. I would like now to call upon Garnet Jenis MP from Canada. Garnet, could you please take the floor, another co-chair of the Interparliamentary Alliance of China? Over to you, Garnet.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here with all of you, some people that I don't know as well, but many friends, both from the Canadian Parliament and from IPAC, from legislatures all over the world. Canada is a country where Parliament has led, but unfortunately, the government has not stepped up at the same level as our Parliament has. It was the Canadian Parliament that was the first Parliament in the world to unanimously pass a motion recognizing the Uyghur genocide, and as a result of an amendment from one of my colleagues on this call, Mr. Brunel Duceppe, also to call for a relocation of the Olympic Games. Canada's parliamentary response has been effective in part because we have a strong Canada Uyghur Parliamentary Friendship Group that I co-chair along with Mr. Samir Zubari, who's also on the call, and there's a number of others here that are involved in that group. So I would encourage other parliamentarians to consider specifically a Uyghur Parliamentary Friendship Group that can work on these issues. Some of the initiatives we're working on in Canada that I hope we'll be able to move forward on in this Parliament are getting the government to recognize the Uyghur genocide, passing new tough supply chain slavery legislation, passing an organ harvesting and trafficking bill. We have an organ harvesting and trafficking bill that has already passed the Senate and is now in the House of Commons, and we're going to be working on getting that passed as soon as possible, making it a criminal offense for a person to go abroad and receive an organ without consent. And we will continue to press the government on applying Magnitsky sanctions to more individuals involved in the Uyghur genocide. I would encourage other countries to pass Magnitsky sanctions legislation. And also, when you put forward Magnitsky sanctions legislation, include provisions where there can be a parliamentary trigger so that it's not just up to the government to initiate the process, but where parliamentarians can effectively nominate individuals for addition to the Magnitsky sanctions list and the government can respond. So those are a few of the items we're working on that I'd encourage others to consider. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Garnet. I'm going to go now to Tim Loughton, MP from the UK. Over to you, Tim.
Luke, thank you very much, and congratulations to Sir Geoffrey and everybody involved with the Tribunal. I think it's been a tremendously important piece of work. I just pick up really where Senator Merkley left off, in that the Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act, which is what this question addresses, I think is a really important piece of legislation coming from the States, and the States has really led the way on this. Absolutely, we're trying to pressurise our own government for having similar sort of measures in the UK. We're trying to replicate the Tibet and Xinjiang reciprocal access legislation, which again started in the US. We have, I think, done quite a good job in terms of some of the sanctions we've started to bring in against individuals in China. Not enough, we need to go further. Some of the restrictions we're now putting on British businesses dealing with questionable interests in Xinjiang, and we need to go much further. We have now persuaded the British government to have a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. We've forced the British government to revise its relationship with Huawei, and we've got House of Commons to vote on genocide recognition. So there's a lot that's going on. But I think the point Senator Markley made is it will be so much more powerful if it's internationally coordinated between governments and parliaments. And that's so important for parliamentarians to meet, to have the same song sheet that we're using in all our parliaments and lobbying our governments around the world. And ultimately, you know, we need to see an accreditation mark on anything coming out of Xinjiang to show that it is legitimate. And if that could have an international recognition, that will go a long way showing that the world is at last standing up to China, calling out China, and there are implications and penalties if China continues to have a flagrant disregard of human rights and abuse its people in Xinjiang as it has been done so flagrantly. And the more we can coordinate our action on that, then the quicker it's going to have the desired effect on China. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. We're going to move to the next question now, if we may, which was, what is preventing your government from responding to the Uyghur Tribunal judgment? And what do you think can be done to overcome it? What is preventing your government from responding to the judgment? So a difficult question, and we're going to go first, if we may, to Honourable Ahmed Munzur Sheikh Emam from South Africa. If you can unmute, please, and give your 2-minute contribution, that would be fantastic, if you can still hear me.
Thank you very much for that, and allow me to congratulate the tribunal on their success. There are 2 points here. I think the first one is the question of what prevents my government. And remember, the South African government particularly is conflicted in that South Africa is indebted to China. That's the first problem. And remember, the entire African continent has a problem because you're indebted to China. That's the first thing. In fact, if you talk about human rights abuse, we have that in South Africa as well by the Chinese, and it's a matter that has been repeatedly highlighted. You know, on particularly, we have a minimum wage in the country, and what the Chinese pay the local South Africans in the country is not even 25% of what they're supposed to pay, and very little or nothing happens to that. But more importantly, one of the things that prevent us from going further is the fact that the Chinese government funds political parties, particularly those that are in governance in certain countries. And so they have this leeway, and that's the first problem. But I think on the issue of what we can actually do is I think there needs to be mass mobilization, boycotting of products, sanctions against them, and creating awareness amongst political parties, legislators in our National Assembly as well. And I think that will go a long way in being able to, but I think it needs to be an international effort, organization of activists from throughout the world that must come together to be able to deal with this. But if we're going to expect countries, particularly in the African continent, to be able to do this in isolation, it will be very, very difficult. But I can assure you that from my side, particularly as a member of parliament, I will do everything and every effort will be put to ensure that I will highlight the awareness of the Uyghur community, the tribunal's judgment itself, and mobilize political parties and things and the communities and set up some structures in place so that, you know, we could, through the social media and other platforms, create awareness in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Imam. I'm going to call now Sir Ian Duncan-Smith MP, another co-chair of IPAC. Sir Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to be brief. All I want to say is very simply the thing that stands in the way of this excellent report, essentially becoming the position for all the governments, that is to say that there is genocide taking place amongst the Uyghur in Xinjiang, is rank cowardice by governments, and I rank ours exactly the same as others. They're all compromised. All of them are busy buying goods from China. They don't really want to figure out where it's coming from. Oh, there's a lot of talk about it, but to be quite frank with you, it's far easier not to do so. I know that the imports to the UK from China have rocketed in the last year and a half. A lot of that is to do with the terrible virus that, of course, did come from China, and which China lied about for some time, thus enabling it to become a pandemic. So we have, all of us, tiptoed around this issue, and it's time we stop doing it. The reality is, number one, Luke said it earlier on, we formed IPAC so that the international community of parliamentarians could come together to put pressure on their governments to do something about it. Many of our governments, and I look around the list here, are in exactly the same boat. They're worried about upsetting China, and so they tiptoe around them, and we have to kind of kick them into it. So IPAC is really important. So if you're not members of IPAC, I do encourage you as parliamentarians to join so we can coordinate our pressure, and that pressure does work. It really does work. If it wasn't working, why are so many members of IPAC now sanctioned by the Chinese government, myself included? Tim, I see on this and Nuz and others in Europe as well, all sanctioned by the Chinese because Mr. President Xi thinks that we're hurting their reputation. Well, that does tell me something. So it's very important, therefore, that we coordinate all this activity. And the only way to get governments to do this is to find that actually other governments are doing it, and that puts pressure on them. And chasing supply chains and disrupting those supply chains, calling them out, using Magnitsky sanctions to hammer those officials that are involved in this is all part of the process. So let's all be part of IPAC. Let's drive this forward together. And let's make sure that governments that are compromised by their commitments in financial trade with China cannot escape the reality that they, by doing nothing, are recognizing genocide and going along with it. And we need to stop it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sir Ian. I'm going to come now also to, again, actually, to Simon O'Connor MP, who had indicated his willingness to address this question from New Zealand, obviously a very proximate country and one very exposed economically. Simon, if you're willing to contribute on this, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think the fundamental problem, and Sir Ian and others have touched on it, is that New Zealand as a small country is worried about repercussions from China. I mean, let's be blunt, countries like New Zealand are highly dependent on a trade relationship with the likes of China. And so we have to navigate that quite carefully. So that really is the fundamental issue. Secondly, I think there is sometimes a lack of awareness in countries like New Zealand. It probably applies to other countries too. People are domestically quite focused on issues at home. And I know for myself, when I ever use social media, for example, to talk about what's happening, say in China, a lot of Kiwis are, well, why are you talking about that international experience and not what's happening domestically? So there's a challenge there, I'd suggest, for people like myself, Larissa and other New Zealand MPs and leaders to make sure Kiwis or New Zealanders understand what's happening. And we somewhat did that successfully around Hong Kong to say, hey, look, a democracy that might not be our own has been crushed, but this has implications for New Zealand. In other words, if we believe in democracy in New Zealand, we believe it in Hong Kong. If we believe in human rights in New Zealand, we should be standing up for human rights in China and other countries. So there's probably two elements there. One is just the awareness question and needing to build that, and that's where the likes of IPAC, for example, come into its own. But also, to be frank and honest, there is always that worry around trade, and no government, no parliament wants to be directly responsible for undermining that. So it is a little bit of a navigation point, but I think it's fair to say, through you, Mr. Chair, Luke, that we still need to press forward. I just finished with this thought. If we're going to have free trade with countries such as China, then we must be free to share our views and viewpoints around the likes of democracy and to call out human rights abuses as loudly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Going back to South Africa now with Mr. Genief Hendricks, MP. Genief, if you'd like to unmute and give your 90-second to 2-minute contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Honorable Genief Hendricks, a Member of Parliament in South Africa. Our government has trade agreements with China, and I'm sure that it will not want to scuttle that for any reason. So they will be hesitant to speak out about the genocide and the slavery. I'm in Cape Town, and we have a 400-year history of slavery and quite a number of activist groups. Now that the tribunal has pronounced, we will activate those groups. We've already sent a parliamentary written question to the Minister of Trade and Industry to inform them of the decision of the tribunal, and we will take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hendricks. I think we also had a contribution here from Samir Zubiri's MP, also from Canada. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke, and I want to thank Sir Godfrey Nice and his team for the very important finding. So much has been said, I won't repeat it, except to say that that at the end, as advocates and as parliamentarians, as civil society leaders, I feel strongly that we all share the same goal, which is to see what's happening to the Uyghur people unfolding right now to stop. And that's our call, our clear call. It's one that is a noble one, one that is just and in conformity with international law. And for us, I think we can all agree that if and when, we are not just asking if, we're expecting when this does stop, this genocide towards Uyghur people, we will have no beef whatsoever with China on this file. The government of the day and the style of leadership that is there right now. I think also all of us can agree that that we need to speak out around discrimination in all of its forms. We saw during COVID the rise of anti-Asian discrimination in some of our countries. I'm sure that we do speak out on this issue. And that's important for us to actually do so in a meaningful way. But I didn't want to take away anything from what's been said thus far. I obviously personally support all that has been said as a member of the governing party here in Canada. I work closely with Garnet and with Alexia Brunel-Duceppe, Garnet Jennis, who are across the aisle. Arnold Versen is here. We have a Senator Duchesne, who is also here from our Canadian Senate. Canada is well represented. We are working together across party lines on this very important human rights issue. I hope other legislatures do the same, and I'm sure that you are. Finally, I'll say that that it's critical that we continue as an international community to work together and support each other in seeing that this genocide is halted. I do believe that is possible. That is our goal. It's not simply an abstract concept. It's something that I do believe can happen and will happen with our continued advocacy. Thank you, Luke, for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Shabir. I'm going to hand over now to Lynn to take the next question. Over to you, Lynn, to pose the question and to chair some questions. So.
Thanks so much, Luke. So we have, thank you for handing over. And we have a question, it has to do with trade again, but this is a different thread, so to speak. There's evidence that the CCP in some countries, such as Vietnam, has been involved in deceptive trade practices of relabeling merchandise to defeat the ban on the products made with forced labor from Xinjiang region of China. Is there a mechanism or an oversight to report such practice? And this question goes to the Honorable Imam.
Sheikh Imam?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for that. Okay, yeah. I think that the issue here is this is the common practice actually. And you'll find this time and time again. We found exactly the same problem with Israel and the products that were coming into the country. And I think you need some form of intelligence from the country of origin, of course, to be tracked to the countries that they actually got, but together with a process in each country of boycotting these products and being able to establish where the products are coming from in these respective countries. I think that if the communities together, and if you have mass mobilization of bringing the communities together to highlight the plight of the Uyghur community and getting them to boycott those products, because it's not going to happen from a country perspective. It is rather has to come from the communities themselves. And I think with organizations like we have in South Africa, like the BDS movement and things, they've gone quite a far to be able to restrict the sale of some of the products that we were trying to restrict in the country. So I think, yes, indeed, it's a coordinated effort that needs to be enhanced through the process of the origin, country of origin, and of course highlighted in the country like South Africa as well. So from our perspective, I think in South Africa, if we mobilize the people, we've done a fantastic piece of work with BDS currently, and I think we'll go a long way in that. But from South Africa itself, from a government perspective, and I think Honorable Hanif Hendricks have already said to you, we have our entire manufacturing industry in South Africa is at a standstill, particularly your textile, leather, and plastic industry, because of the imports and because they're indebted to China. So I think we'll go a long way in terms of mobilizing support in the country to boycott these products and be able to identify those products that, you know, that are being relabeled. Thank you very much.
Yes. I'm seeing here that my next question will probably need to be delayed. Luke, I will hand it over to your last question.
Okay, so this was a question about what can be done to secure immediate, meaningful, and unfettered access to Xinjiang for the UN and independent observers in line with various recommendations from various UN bodies. I wonder if anybody wants to come in on that. I know some of you have worked on it particularly. Louisa, I know you particularly, it's something that interests you, but if there's anybody else who hasn't made a contribution yet and wants to speak about unfettered access to Xinjiang and what can be done on that, please do raise your hand now or unmute and speak. Otherwise, I'm going to call upon you, Louisa, perhaps to speak about what you've been doing on that. Louisa, over to you.
Well, kia ora anō, and thank you, Luke. I think I'm doing what we're all doing, which is to support our government's calls. I mean, our government have highlighted the need for the UN to gather the evidence so they can make a determination about how best to respond. And in lieu of the judicial findings, as I said before, a report from the UN High Commissioner that highlights the abuses in Xinjiang, I think will absolutely shift, you know, government country responses to how we then deal with it. In the meantime, obviously all we can do is continue to call for that unfettered access. But I'm aware there were media reports just before Christmas that a report is imminent. And so maybe as a next step within this context, I don't know how easy it is to get Michelle Bachelet and whether or not she'd be willing to engage with us. But I do think after hearing Sir Geoffrey and obviously the evidence that the tribunal has being available is one thing, but that's why I asked if there had been any formal engagement between the tribunal and the UN Human Rights Commission, and actually formally giving that evidence rather than just having it available if they request it. Because until we have what is akin to judicial findings, and within the context we have, it's impossible. So in lieu of that, I think a report from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is really the only viable mechanism that will motivate and I think put a lot of pressure on governments to move to recognising what is actually happening there. So I will continue to have discussions with my Minister of Foreign Affairs, like most of us, but I'm also really clear that in lieu of those judicial findings, a UN report is, I think, the only viable way forward.
Thank you very much, Louisa. And yes, there is an imminent report, which was encouraged. Actually, the publication was apparently brought forward after the Uyghur Tribunal. So one of the many achievements of the Uyghur Tribunal. I'm going to go now to Canada again, to Alexis Brunel-Doucet from the Bloc Québécois in Canada. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luke. I want to say thank you to all the members of the tribunal. And of course, I salute all my friends, legislators from all around the world. And a big hello to my friend Dalconisa. You will excuse me, English is not my first language, so I'll try to sound intelligent. A lot have been said here. Of course, I agree with everything that have been said, especially from my friends from other parties in Canada. Economic sanctions, of course, Magnitsky sanctions, labor, forced labor act legislation. Of course, we all agree with that. But I will underline one thing that might have not been said, and this is very important because sometimes as legislator, we are stuck in a parliamentarian bubble and then we lose contact with ordinary people sometimes. And this is very important for me since the Uyghur genocide, nobody was talking about it before we linked it with the Olympics in Beijing. When I wrote an open letter that my friend Samir and Garnet signed it from all other parties. And suddenly people on the street were talking about it. Suddenly people at the coffee machine were talking about it, in the bus station, at the dinner with their kids. And it's very important in our democracy. When you have the public opinion, you can, bring that in the House and make legislation more efficient. When you have the image and the public opinion, I hope I make myself clear here because it's very important. As other MPs, I said it before, and Senator Rice said it, MP O'Connor said it. We have to seek multilateral actions, and to succeed in multilateral action, we need to have our population with us on this particular subject. So that's why we link the Olympics with the Uyghur genocide here in Canada, and that's how we made a lot of noise, and it went international. And I think we attacked China on her pride, on her image, and this is this is another point that's very important. So let's keep working together. Luke, I'll call you tomorrow to join IPAC for sure. The invitation is there, so I'll be there. And I want to thank you to everybody. I'm sorry again for my English. I'll improve it. I'll be better next time. But just remember, everybody, we are MPs, but we need our population with us when we are on those kind of subjects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexis. If I could just ask now, before we go to a quick summing up and then a contribution from Dalconisa, the president of the World Uyghur Congress, I would like to ask any of the legislators on our very large panel here who have not spoken if they would like to make a brief contribution. Are there any legislators who have not spoken who would like to make a general contribution? Now is your opportunity to raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So what I will do then is very quickly raise a few things which I believe have come up. One is the use of parliamentary mechanisms to raise awareness, even if you don't necessarily win those things, even if they're motions that don't secure legislative change, they can help your populations, your constituents, and the people of your country to understand what's happening. International partnership and coordination is something you are all desiring to do. IPAC can be a vehicle for that, but there are other vehicles too. Certainly we should be encouraging our governments to do that. as well. Magnitsky sanctions for those countries that don't yet have Magnitsky legislation. This might be something you can share expertise on. I hope that the organizers of this conference can perhaps send out to everybody else some of the initiatives that have been pursued by various legislators on this call. And finally, I might mention an initiative which has just been launched in the UK, which seeks to mandate the UK government to perform an assessment about a serious risk of genocide. You've heard serious risk be mentioned a few times on this call, and that really should be the trigger for state responsibility under the Genocide Convention. Very few states perform those assessments because of the serious legal obligations attached to them. So trying to find ways that you can mandate your governments to do those assessments would be very powerful, and that's something underway in the UK. So all of that said, that's enough from me. I'll hand over to you, Lynn, to introduce Dolkan Issa from the World Uyghur Congress. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the discussion, and we are coming to a close, and your insights are greatly appreciated. Endearingly, the Vietnamese people call each other Dong Bao, people of the same pouch. The 4,000-year-old legend of the union of Lac Long Quân and Oka told of 100 eggs in a common pouch, representing 100 children, 100 tribes, 100 voices, and a celebration of diversity of people, culture, and ideas. Today, we stand with our brothers and sisters in Xinjiang. There is no place in our human family for genocide or forced organ harvesting. We will end this conference with a closing remark from Dolkan Issa, President, World Uyghur Congress. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Lynn. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many of my good friends and the friends of the Uyghur today. I would like to thank organizer and inviting me to deliver a closing remark for this important event, which has highlighted the importance of the Uyghur Tribunal and the weight of its judgment. It has been with utmost appreciation that World Uyghur Congress and the Uyghur diaspora community worldwide has followed the proceedings of the Uyghur Tribunal over the past year and a half. We are extremely thankful Sir Jeffrey Nice, the tribunal members and its staff and the volunteers for all their time and hard work that they have dedicated to this daunting task. Not only tribunal judgment itself, but entire process of the Uyghur Tribunal has been of great significance to the Uyghurs and the Kazakh people. During the two in-person hearings in June and September 2021, more than 2,000 Uyghur and the Kazakh camp survivors and the others who have suffered from the Chinese government's unspeakable crimes, including myself, were given opportunity to tell their stories. Of course, we have done so countless times already, but to provide witness testimony to independent legal bodies that investigates Chinese crimes, give us feeling that our experience and the suffering were finally being properly considered. In the final judgment of the tribunal, ruling that China's government is committing crime against humanity, genocide, brought a great sense of relief. At that same time, it is confirmed that this stress that has been rooted in our heart and mind for many years now. Because while the Uyghur Tribunal judgment has been great victory for the Uyghur people or loved one in Turkestan continue to suffer every day. The judgment such highlights the need increasing collaboration between the national government, multilateral institutions, the private sector, citizens globally took meaningful action to end the Uyghur genocide and hold its perpetrators to account. It is with the call to actions that I would like to conclude while putting a legal responsibility to act upon signatory of the UN Genocide Convention. Non-individual who believes in basic human rights and freedom can now close their eyes to what's happening to the Uyghur people in Turkestan. The time is to act now, and thank you for all your attention, and so thanks for your help.
Again, thank you all for attending the conference. We hope that you will continue to support the organization that stand up against genocide and torture, that you will champion the advancement of human rights and human dignity. Have a good rest of the day and stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Merci.
everyone.
Merci.
Thank you. Goodbye.
You.
Thank you.